Welcome to the Think Christian podcast, where we talk about faith and pop culture, because there's no such thing as secular. I'm Josh Larsen, your host and senior producer at thinkchristian.net. We've been upping our anime appreciation here at TC. We just had our winter gathering of the TC Movie Club to discuss the films of Japanese animator Hayao Miyazaki. You can look for that conversation soon in this podcast feed. Miyazaki's The Boy and the Heron, that got some attention on our recent Best Movies of 2023 episode. And last fall, we both wrote about and podcasted about One Piece, Netflix's live-action adaptation of the beloved anime series. Now we have another Netflix production to consider, this time a live-action adaptation of Avatar: The Last Airbender. That first ran as an animated series nearly 20 years ago on Nickelodeon. I know my Miyazaki. Airbending? Not so much. So let's bring on Claude Atcho and Roslyn Hernández to discuss the new series, including how Christians should think about its relationship to Eastern spirituality. I have two capable guides here to lead me through the world of Avatar: The Last Airbender, Claude Atcho and Roslyn Hernández. So I guess if I'm in the position of Aang, I've emerged from the ice after 100 years. I'm not quite sure what's going on here. Will you two be my Sokka and Katara? Does that sound good?
Oh, man. That's great. Well done. Well done. Yes, we will.
I say Team Avatar.
Okay, good. I like it. I'm going to need some help here. I mean, obviously, I know enough to use those names, okay? Because I have watched Netflix's live-action adaptation of Avatar: The Last Airbender. Now, the beloved anime series, that first aired on Nickelodeon 2005. So we're going back a bit when this all started. This Netflix series, it's been my first real experience with the franchise, I'm sad to say. So I'm very, very late to the party. Definitely was aware of it, have edited Think Christian pieces referring to the original anime series. But this was my real immersion into it. How about you two? Were you there from the start, Roslyn? Were you watching this on Nickelodeon?
I was not, sadly. I didn't really watch. I don't remember watching a lot of cartoons in the 2000s. I'm not even sure how old I was, but I didn't watch it. I watched it more as a young adult in undergrad, and I remember binging through this. So it was interesting to rewatch it again. It wasn't like I was already an adult, but it still felt very different, and I saw a lot of different things than I saw back then. So okay. I'm really interested to see how Claude, how it was for you.
Yeah, what's your relationship with the original show, Claude?
Yeah, so the original I was not a part of, when it initially aired in 2005. I think a lot of, anime or animation shows, I came to a little bit later, and that's partly why I enjoy them so much. I felt like I didn't have access to it, or it just wasn't on my radar or whatnot. So actually, I bought the series on Blu-ray, I want to say in 2019 or 2018.
Okay.
And I think it had the animated series had a big resurgence during the height of the pandemic in 2020. So maybe I was a little bit ahead of the curve there. So I just started watching it myself, and then watching it with my boys. We really enjoyed it. I actually don't think I was actually realizing we hadn't finished the series. I've seen everything that Netflix adapts, but I don't think we've finished the series. And I don't know why, because we loved it, and I loved the animated show. I mean, really everything about it. It to me deserves the acclaim that it's received as one of the better TV shows that we've had in some time. So yeah, I mean,
there's a lot to watch if you're going to catch up. I mean, it would take a while, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I am very eager to hear what you both made of this, with that experience you're bringing to it, of this live action series. And Claude, maybe we'll stick with you, and you can fill listeners in who aren't as familiar, sort of the basic premise of the series. And you can tell us about some of these characters. We have Aang, played by Gordon Cormier, Sokka, played by Ian Ousley, and Katara, who is played by Gowan Dio. Those are maybe the three main characters. So tell me a little bit about them, but also what you think this adaptation gets right, and one thing it gets right, and maybe one thing it gets wrong or doesn't quite hit the mark with.
Yeah, so I would say big picture for Avatar. It's taking place in a fantasy world. I mean, it is on the sort of scale of world building like a Harry Potter. It's right along those sort of lines, but it's working from sort of Eastern mythology, Eastern spirituality, martial arts influence, all of that. So it's pretty amazing in that sense. And kind of the basic layout is that the world is broken up into four nations. There's the Water Tribe, there's the Earth Kingdom, Fire Nation, and the air nomads. And basically, each of those nations, they can control, they have the capability of controlling the corresponding element. People within the nation are known as benders, so you can control water, control air, control earth, and it leads to some pretty awesome sort of battle scenes. But in the context of Avatar, it's sort of a war of the worlds, and in particular, the Fire Nation is really pushing forward and trying to control, oppress, and really reign and rule over everybody. And the story centers on Aang, as you mentioned. He is a boy who's basically through this happenstance is kind of frozen in time and wakes up after about a century. But it looks like he might be the promised one, the kind of messiah sort of figure, the avatar, the one who could master all four elements and overcome evil in the world and help usher in kind of a new age. And in Avatar, he's joined up quickly by two friends, a brother and sister, Katara and Sokka, from the Water Tribe, and they kind of join in with him and this big furry animal Appa, and they set out on an adventure. Meanwhile,
Sky bison, is that?
Sky bison,
do I have that right?
like
A sky bison
buffalo type of thing. Yeah, yeah, pretty cool.
It's wild.
It's what every kid wishes for, and so they're kind of on that journey. Aang is kind of trying to discover his powers, figure out his calling, all of that. And at the same time, the Fire Nation is on a move. And in particular, there's a character, Prince Zuko, played by Dallas Liu, who is another kind of young man, similar to Aang. And he is out trying to hunt the Avatar for some complicated reasons. And so that really kind of sets the premise of the show. I would say the one thing that works a little bit in the adaptation is there's an element of humor, and I think that does come through in adaptation in some neat ways. I think that's one thing that the animated show really nails. But I enjoyed the fact that they honored that in the adaptation. So there's one king in particular who is really goofy and really strange that comes across. I think it's in episode 3, and there's these moments where it sounds like he's going to like order someone to be killed, but then he'll say, "No, throw them a feast," right? Not throw them in the dungeon or not throw them, into jail, throw them a feast. So there's a couple of things that I really appreciate with the actors, that they try to capture that sort of element of humor in the series. And I'm glad that remained intact.
Nice. And how about you, Roslyn? Was that something, the humor that was carried over? I will say I did jump back and watch a handful of episodes from the anime, and I was surprised how funny it was.
Yes.
There's definitely way more humor, I would guess, from what I saw in the anime, but there are little bits of it that they tried to carry over. Is that something you liked about this adaptation, Roslyn, or do you wish there was more humor?
No, I liked the amount of humor. I think for a children's cartoon, the amount of humor that the anime has is correct, but I really like how the characters have grown a little bit in the adaptation. Katara and Sokka definitely seem a little bit older, but I think what I really like that is a little bit different from the original for me is the friendship between them, and how that is a little bit more the focus of their journey. So in the original, like, Sokka is very annoying in the beginning. It takes him a longer while for him to get it that he and his sister and Aang are a team, right? And so he's like really preoccupied with like being the leader, like we see in the live action version. But he gets over that quickly in the Netflix version, and their friendship is stronger in the Netflix version. I think one thing, so I also kind of had to go back and view some of the episodes. In the original, it focuses more on Aang being a little bit anxious about losing his friends, or like not having someone there for him. And in this version, they're like in it together from the beginning. Yeah. And there's no question about that. And they are all learning together. I think in something that we don't get from the anime version is that they kind of make more mistakes, like each person as their own self. And here they're all like, okay, we're going to do this together. We're doing whatever decisions we make. We're trying to make it for the good of all three of us, or for the good of other people. Like, for example, in the original, Katara steals a scroll to learn
Mhm.
waterbending, and then some
Mhm.
pirates like come after them. We don't get that kind of thing here. There's like a clear mission. There's a clear we're all in it together, and they kind of make mistakes, or I don't feel like they really make that many mistakes in the live action version. They more face challenges as a team.
Mhm. Yeah, and they are a tight core, and so maybe this is a case where condensing things works to its benefit,
Mhm.
if that's something you appreciate about it. Is there anything that, you thought, they didn't quite get right, Roslyn, in making this adaptation?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still trying to see, where they take this. But something that I remembered even before I went back to watch some of the episode is that in the animation, Aang decides to start training. And in the live action, he's very hesitant.
Mm,
So he's very unwilling to like accept, and this is the crux of his journey in the live action, right? That he's kind of like having a hard time accepting that he's the avatar, or like accepting all the responsibilities of what the avatar means
yeah.
and what it means for him to be the avatar as Aang. In the live action, he's like seeking masters and like learning to bend. But in here, he's like not doing any of that. So I'm just waiting to see how they develop that. I don't want to see him just like master the elements like magically by like
Yeah.
Mhm.
not really working at it. So yeah, I'm waiting to see that. And then as I was looking online, some of the things, there was one thing that a lot of people are kind of bothered by, but I wasn't bothered by it. I was actually like, okay, this is actually an okay change for me. So King Boomy in the animated series is really fun and really supports Aang from the beginning.
Mm,
In the Netflix series, he's kind of, there's like a little bit of animosity, or he's like angry inside, a little bit jaded from being a leader. And he's one of the people that tells Aang, like, you can't have friends if you're going to be the avatar.
That's
Like
right.
as a
Yep.
leader, you can't have other people like kind of holding you back. For me, that adds to the tension of what this series is going for. So it doesn't bother me that he's not the like jovial, quirky King Boomy that we know from the animated series, because I think in the end that contrast is adding that pressure to what Aang's character is going through in this series.
yeah, I think that's right. It's very much the conflict of Aang resisting in many ways, taking on this mantle,
Mhm.
and he's like maybe a Moses figure in some ways, where like this is being presented to him, he's being called upon, and
Mhm.
just doesn't want to carry that, and it's understandable because he's a kid, I mean, this is a young kid. That's kind of something that hits more in a live action, at least for me. Obviously, he's drawn in the anime as a child, and you can see he's
Yep.
smaller and younger. But to see, in this performance from Gordon Cormier, this young boy actually having to take all this upon him, I think it
Mm.
makes sense that they would emphasize that
Mhm.
conflict within him, because it hit home more for me. Did you have anything, Claude, that didn't work for you, whether it was a change or just on the show as the show itself?
Yeah, I had a lot of things that didn't work.
Oh boy.
For me.
Oh, okay. So wait. So let me
Okay, give
back
us
up,
your laundry list.
Roslyn, would you say you're mostly positive about the adaptation? You sound like it.
Yeah, I think so. And that might be because I am not like I haven't gone back to watch it
They're
in
not
a
fresh.
while. Yes,
Yeah. Okay.
I don't have as much. And I also kind of, even with adaptations, I kind of like to come to it anew, like fresh, like let it be itself and tell
That's
it what
fair.
it wants to tell me. Yeah.
That's fair. Okay. And Claude, am I sensing if you had to say, you're a little more thumbs down on it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, and I
Mhm.
think that's not, it's not a knock on the actors or, all the team and the people that worked on us to put this together. It's really hard to bring this stuff to life. And I think it's part of the limitation of moving from animation to live action. The magic is lost. The battle scenes don't work as well.
Mhm.
The
Mm,
CGI backgrounds don't work as well. There's a whole lot of stuff that just doesn't work. And to the point where like I'm watching this and I'm watching it and I'm like, man, I want to go back and the anime is great. I want to go back and watch the animated show. Like, why am I watching this? Like that, like when I feel that, it means
yeah.
that there's just it's just stretching to its limits. It's doing the best that it can, but it's not meant to capture that. So
Yeah.
I think the fundamental issue is just the live action as a
Mhm.
format. It can't capture the magic in the same way. even though there's actors that are working really hard, and obviously they opened up the wallets for the budgets and did the best that they could. It's just not the same, and you lose a lot of the visual humor. You lose a lot of and also a lot of the pacing. There's a lot of the storytelling that is just, there's no nuance. There's no space for things to breathe. It's got to be crammed into the 8 episodes. They don't know if they're going to get renewed for the second season unless people like it. So they got to do as much as they can while they can. All these sort of things that are just sort of unfortunate limits.
Yeah, that's understandable. And it's kind of an adaptation like this has to bust through the why bother question, and justify its own existence. And for you, maybe it sounds like it didn't. I would agree. I watched, as I said, the live action first, got through the whole series, and then went back and watched a couple episodes of the anime. And I would agree, while even some of the more well-done action sequences, I was like, oh, I'm really eager to see what this looks like animated, because there is, I guess I would call it like a screensaver flatness to some of the CGI backgrounds that were disappointing. But there's very much a fluctuation in quality of the effects in this, I would say, because
That's
the
true.
one episode that got me hooked, when I enjoyed it overall and was just kind of, happy to be watching it. But I kind of got hooked with episode 5, which was called Spirited Away. And I'm not hooked just because they're borrowing a Hayao Miyazaki movie title. What I loved about it, so basically in this episode, this is where they're exploring the thin places. That's what it's called here, between the spirit world and the human world. I thought this is the most standout use of special effects in the whole season. That giant talking owl we meet early on just looks incredible. And this episode also had a horror vibe, which I really got with. The character of Ko, the face stealer, my goodness. That's about the most well-done CGI character I've seen in a long time. This giant centipede kind of that has these series of rotating faces, just incredibly envisioned, disturbing, tactile, and none of that stuff had that flatness that some of the screensaver effects had. So yeah, but overall, when I did, to your point, Claude, then go back and watch some of those other animated episodes, there's still a freedom that pure animation has, that is hard to capture when you're bringing it into a live action setting. But I did want to go back to this idea of the thin places in the episode, because I think that's a nice entry point for us. Thin places is a term somewhat familiar for Christians. I think we would talk about it as the places where the presence of God punctuates or permeates this world. And, maybe we experience this in worship, maybe it's in devotions, maybe it's simply in experiencing the sacrificial love of someone else, or just being in nature. So many ways I think we can sense as believers these thin places. And, as you mentioned, Claude, Avatar: The Last Airbender, not coming from a North American Christian perspective. The franchise was born in the United States. The co-creators, Michael Dante DiMartino and Brian Konietzko, they met as students at Rhode Island School of Design and then went on to produce the original series at Nickelodeon. But yeah, it's steeped in Eastern philosophy and religion. So back when the original animated Avatar episodes started airing on Netflix, this was around 2020. Maybe this is right around, Claude, when I think you said maybe you revisited, or maybe it was you, Roslyn. But we did write about that series on TC. Sarah Welch Larsen wrote about them. And Sarah's going to be mad at me, by the way, that I didn't invite her for this episode. I'm so sorry, Sarah. You were just on our Oscar show. I had to spread the wealth, so apologies. But anyways, I do want to quote from Sarah's piece, because here's what she wrote about the original anime. Eastern philosophy permeates the show. Aang was raised by monks in a kind of Buddhist monastery, and he's a reincarnation of all the other avatars who came before him. Taoist ideas about balance and Shinto concepts of pantheistic nature spirits underline the show's universe. And this is important, what she observes. These influences cannot be divorced from the story. Without its immersion in Eastern philosophy, the show's aesthetics would be disingenuous and appropriative. And yet, Avatar still benefits from a reading from an explicitly Christian perspective. So Sarah goes on to do that in her piece. We'll link to it in the show notes so listeners can read what she found in the original series. But getting to the live action adaptation, I'd like to hear from you two on this topic. While respecting the show's rootedness in Eastern religions, What do you think a Christian might be able to take away from this live action version of the story? What would you say, Roslyn?
Yeah, I think there's so much. It's such a rich story narrative, such rich characters and interactions and dynamics. But something that I am really attached to looking at in pop culture is intergenerational relationships and the dynamics between those. And so within this, I think the Christian virtues that we know of as like hope, humility, compassion are really visible and very key characters. And I go with like Aang and Monk Gyatso, Aang and
Mm,
King Bumi, Zuko and Uncle Iroh, and even
Mhm.
Katara and her granny, and Katara and Master Paku at the end. There's these really great dynamics that really showcase these virtues of compassion. You know, like Uncle Iroh like has so much compassion and love for Zuko. He's so empathetic towards him and he's so patient with him. And the way that these two love each other is really, really interesting. And so there's such an acceptance of each other. And it's something that I really love, especially coming from Uncle Iroh, who, you know, there's a reason why he loves him that way because of his own laws, but also he really witnesses Zuko. He's a
mm.
witness of Zuko. And they Zuko doesn't have to earn Uncle Iroh's love the way he has felt that he has had to earn his father's love.
Ah, good. It's not too late.
What are you doing here, Uncle?
Same as you. Getting ready to embark on what is sure to be a memorable journey.
You want to come with me?
I've come fully prepared. All the tea I need.
I don't need a babysitter.
How about a friend?
And so for me, you know, as someone who's more of a mystical Christian, it comes back to that of like just being witnessed, just being accepted and loved for who you are. Another thing that comes up for me is how fear gets rid of, how love gets rid of fear, right? And that verse, 1 John 4:18, comes to mind. There's no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear. For fear has to do with punishment, and whoever fears has not been perfected in love. And so I really see how Zuko is being perfected by his uncle's love in this. And then just I was really struck by the humility that Master Paku showed in the end of that episode when he was like telling Katara, you know, like, thanks for challenging me. I was wrong.
Mhm.
And you know, we're gonna change things. And so like that revelation and challenging for the younger generations and those dynamics with the older generations are really impactful for me, and seeing the growth in also the older generation who's like, we haven't really arrived, we're still on the journey, and like thank you for being on the journey with me and like helping me learn something together.
Yeah, that intergenerational element
Mhm.
is, it makes sense right away, but then as you're going through all those relationships, it really is a recurring motif,
Mhm.
that almost all the major characters are paired, with someone that they're having that experience with. And the fear and love thing, that is I think that's what I tapped into as well, sort of in a different way. It was episode 3, I think it was, where Katara is trying to refine her water bending powers, but she keeps failing. And we get the impression because of these, we cut to these flashbacks where she's remembering her mother's death, and that's what's causing her to fail, is that distress. So it's that fear, essentially, I think, what you're talking about, Roslyn. And then another character says to her, don't think about your mother's death. Think about the goodness of her life. So the beautiful things about her. And sure enough, when Katara focuses on that, she's able to really beautifully bend the water in front of her. I think the effects are very um they work in this scene as well. And it's this nice visual encapsulation of the failure of fear and the sustenance of love. And I think that's interesting to think about as Christians, when we do face obstacles, ask the question, what's our motivation
Mhm.
in working through this?
Mm.
Is it beauty or is it anger? And I think if we look at something like, if God is our model, we do see God's anger, right? Especially if you look in the Old Testament. But even there, you also see God honoring the covenant. And we see ultimately, I think, God's focus on beauty, on healing, restoration. Of course, these are the sort of things that are particularly embodied by Jesus. So I really noticed that trajectory for characters in Avatar: The Last Airbender too. That even in the
Mm,
pursuit of justice, they're finding motivation in goodness and love rather than anger and hate. At least the characters that we come
mhm,
to admire. There are opposing characters who are
mhm,
doing the opposite, right? But
mhm.
but when you see Katara able to harness her bending powers by embracing goodness and beauty, I think that's a real powerful example of the fear and love dichotomy you're talking about, Roslyn. But how about you, Claude? And any of this stuff or something different that kind of connected with you?
I think these are great points. The intergenerational point is a really helpful one. It's in a sense obvious, but I think you pulled out a lot of the depth, Rosalind, to that motif, and that relates to the insight for me that registered the most, which was just sort of that the world is a spiritual place, and I think for Western audiences, even for Western Christians, we can very easily buy into a rationalistic mindset where all that there is in the world is the things that we see. Yes, we know God is real. Yes, we know the Holy Spirit's real. But like it's just kind of like by and large, we live as if everything is just sort of like natural, normal, and visible. That's what the world is. And I think part of the benefit of these sort of shows that are rooted in Eastern traditions is that in their spirituality, that's not at all the case. And in fact, in most of the spirituality around most of the world for most of the time, that's not the case. So I think in a lot of senses, this is a really helpful corrective to us to
Mhm.
remember that there actually are, like under the Christian reading, in reality, there are spirits in the world. There are angels. There are demons. There are forces and powers that are working against the purposes of God and the flourishing of all humanity. And I think these sort of shows, remind us that these other perspectives and philosophies, they were keyed into that in a way that I think the scriptures are, but I think sometimes for us in Western Christian traditions, we very much are not. In the same way that the scriptures tell us that we are communal people, which means we need to be an intergenerational people. We also forget that very often. We put our elderly family members and houses very far away from us and all these different sort of things. And I think in the same way that these sort of shows from different cultures can remind us of that connectivity, I think they can remind us of a more fully orbed spiritual worldview in the
Mm.
sense that the world is not just all that we see. So I think there's a great deal of value for Christian viewers to allow those elements of Avatar to sort of just spark the imagination a little bit and to remind us actually that this is probably closer to the scriptural worldview than what many of us kind of carry by default in our day to day.
Yeah, I mean, that resonates with my experience and, going to Christian schools my whole life, and it was, it was a book thing, right? It's kind of you're taught of it as a book thing, whereas this is encouraging, as you say, Claude, it reminds us of the thin places as well, which, I guess books can get you to, but not always. Maybe books aren't
Yeah,
the best
yeah,
route to
yeah,
the thin place.
yeah,
I don't know.
yeah, yeah.
They can encourage us that, to go pursue the thin place in another way. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and I think there's also like we think of the for in that episode Spirited Away. There's particular forests, and this is part of Shinto religion and things of that sort. Certain places, certain locations that are more potent spiritually than others, and I think it's that we need to. Those are things to consider, right? And obviously, we want to think about those scripturally with the church and with the Christian tradition. But like that also is a helpful corrective to remind us. So, like, no, that's also a part of our perspective as well. We even think about how often, sometimes we can just get to the place where we're like, yeah, church. We want to make church so comfortable and welcoming for everybody. We forget that church itself is a thin place. When two or three are gathered in His name, it actually is a really special
Mm,
place. So that is, in our cases, our church meets in a school, so it's sort of run down, but it's at the same time, it is a thin place when we're gathered in that particular way. So
mm.
I think there's a lot of great insights that are a part of these other traditions that can help as sort of gentle correctives as we think about fully entering into our tradition as disciples.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes gathering in that way transforms the place, and
Yes.
so the place can be as sort of uninteresting. It doesn't really matter if you're gathering together in that way. Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask one more question before we leave here. Did you two have a favorite character, even if you didn't like it overall? Maybe Claude, was there a character that resonated with you, and was it a different character than one you kind of came away with from the anime as a favorite?
I think for me, it was Prince Zuko, Dallas Liu. I think he captured a lot of the angst, the nuance, kind of the heartache of that character. And I think he was really faithful to the performance in the anime as well, because that voice actor, I think Dante Briscoe maybe, is really beloved as well. And so I was really pleased with that performance. I thought maybe Sokka would be one that I really enjoyed as well, but I think one of the changes, Roslyn, that you referred to, Sokka starts in the animated version. He starts more combative with his sister, and actually, the actors commented that they didn't want him to be as sexist in the live adaptation. I think that was a poor decision, because if they
Mm.
allowed him to be the way he was in the animated show, you see his journey of growth, which I think really helps, and it could also help those who are viewing grow as well. So I had come in thinking, okay, maybe I'll really like Sokka, but it ended up being Prince Zuko. So that's a character that I really connected with in the adaptation.
Okay. Did you have a shift on this question, Russell?
I think I remained the same.
Okay.
And if I remember correctly, I really, really liked Uncle Iroh in the original anime, and I
Mm.
really loved him in this as well. And Paul Sun Hyung Lee is such. ah, he did
Yeah, he's
so
amazing.
well with this character as well. I loved him in Kim's Convenience, and then I
Yes.
loved him
That's
in
right.
Mandalorian as well, even though he's like has a smaller part. And so I was really happy to see him here. But yes, Uncle Iroh is a character who, for me, has just really held tensions.
Mm.
He's from the Fire Nation, and they're not really great people. But he's so tender and compassionate, and he's so funny too. Like in the original, he's always talking about like drinking tea, and he
Yeah.
and he actually kind of takes on a little bit more some of that monk way of speaking when he's talking to Zuko, even in the original anime. And so he'll say things like, oh, like you need to rest, like a man needs his rest, or just like those things that seem like throwaway phrases, but if you really think about them, they hold like really deep truths.
Mhm.
So Uncle Iroh has been my favorite character
Yeah.
all
Yeah,
along.
deep truth and a deep care for Zuko, you sense that, absolutely. And he has just a gentleness about him, so makes sense. All right. Well, thank you both. It was good to have some experts with me. And yeah, as you said, I guess we're waiting to see if there will be a season 2, so,
Yeah.
that is up in the air. But, at least we got this season to talk about. What are you guys up to otherwise? Claude, where are things with the book project?
Yeah, so I've got a devotional that's coming out in fall 2025. I am working on it. It's being worked on,
That's good.
supposedly, or needs to start being worked on maybe after this. So yeah, y'all can keep me in your prayers. So try to do that. I'm excited about the project. And
I hope
yeah,
I didn't just remind you that you had this project,
no,
Claude.
no, no. I
As it's,
was thinking about it this morning. So
Okay,
this is
good.
another good
Okay.
reminder. Yeah. So yeah, and I turned that in at the end of summer. So I got a little bit of time, and I got some
Alright.
good headway. So yeah, working on that, and then I think that's kind of it. Other than popping on here, I'm excited. There's some other shows that are coming up this year that I'm excited about. So I feel like I go in and out of interest with TV, but
Mm.
this is a nice run, and I'm glad we got to jump on and talk about this, even though doesn't live up to the anime. Like it's still solid. So
Mm.
I'm thankful for it.
Nice. All right. How about you, Roslyn? What have you been up to? Anything we should look out for?
I think if you're interested in thinking about the intersection of justice and faith, check out the Chasing Justice podcast that I produce. I was actually in one of the episodes. If you know or if you are an investigator in Enneagram 5 and you want to know a little bit more of how Enneagram 5s who tend to be more in the headspace and not really, active about how we can join in social justice. You can go ahead and listen to that episode. And yeah, if you know anyone who's interested in youth ministry, check out the FYI on Youth Ministry podcast.
Awesome. We will link to both of those. So all the best on your good work, both of you, and thanks again for joining me today.
Always a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Lots of good stuff there from Claude and Roslyn. If you want more, again, Sarah Welch Larsen wrote about the original Avatar series over at thinkchristian.net. Be sure to check that out. We'd love to get listeners' thoughts on Avatar, The Last Airbender, whether it's the original series, this live-action adaptation, or, you know what, if you braved M. Night Shyamalan's poorly received 2010 theatrical adaptation, feel free to share those thoughts too. Just email us at tcpodcast@thinkchristian.net. You can also connect with us on Facebook and Twitter/X. Look for us at Think Christian. The TC Podcast is a listener-supported production of Reframe Ministries, a family of programs designed to help you see your whole life reframed by God's gospel story. Visit reframeministries.org for more information. Our audio engineer and post-production supervisor is John Reeder, and Reframe's co-director overseeing content strategy is Robin Basselin. I'm Josh Larsen. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back in a couple of weeks to consider how another corner of our pop culture fandom connects with our faith.